Today is December 17th, 2009. I'm Deb Lawrence at the Peabody Public Library, and today we are here with John Pontzius. Thank you for being here with us today.
I'm glad to be here.
So, we're going to talk a little bit about where you grew up. I also know you've written a couple of books. You might want to tell us a little bit about that. So, where did you grow up?
I grew up on a farm on the Thorncreek Smith Township line, and my brother, my sister, and I went to Thorncreek Center grade school and Columbia City High School, and our close neighbors and cousins, they lived in Smith Township, and they went to Collins grade school and Cherry-Bosco High School.
So you were just that close to the line.
Yeah, it seems it did seem strange. I moved back on the farm 10 years ago, and when my mother, it was a sure thing that my mother would be in a nursing home from then on. And there are two houses on the farm, and I live in the smaller one, and my brother lives in the larger one. And I drink out of the same glasses and eat off of the same plates and use the pots and pans my mother did. The family has been on this farm since 1835. That's 174 years. And in 2004, we received from the Indiana Department of Agriculture the Hoosier Homestead Award for 150 years. It's, I think, only one of two in Whitley County, and it's, I think it's the oldest continuously owned family farm in Thorncreek Township.
Wow.
So I, a couple of years ago, decided to write a history of the farm. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of information available. The census records, the agricultural census records from 1850 to 1880 of Indiana, and I think most other states, and especially in the Midwest, have an amazing amount of information. How many pigs and cows, and how many bushels of oats, and how many acres of woods. And my grandfather started the Purdue record accounts in 1929. And it went on until 1974 with my father. It's an amazing amount of information.
Now those are something that the farmer themselves takes and then sends to Purdue?
Yes, they use a record book that Purdue furnishes. And at the end of the year, someone, an expert or professor from Purdue, visits the farm owner and advises on what they can do better and how they rank with other farms. And maybe there were about 15 like that in Whitley County. Mm-hmm. And also my mother made carbon copies of all her letters, and which were many, and she had a diary for a while. So there was a lot of information which I thought could be representative of other farms. Mm-hmm. And show how life was like for the last 150 years on a rather typical farm. But there were some very unusual things happen on a farm, and so it was fun to write about. I think what I'll do is read a poem I wrote about
that'd be
growing up
great.
on a farm. and how it was like to come back. This is called a short autobiography of a Hoosier farm boy. I was a Hoosier boy growing up on a farm, making hay, getting the cows at milk time, hanging out in the woods, wading the creek, picking wildflowers for Mom, racing the dog down the lane, napping under the maple, keeping the pigs from hunger, shooting baskets in the barn. It was a time and a place where I never really knew the difference between fun and work. A place in the Midwest sun where life was real and common sense got you through it. There did come a day when the lure of the far horizon caught my imagination, grabbed my soul, a wondering, then a wandering. And so I left the farm, flying away to the great unknown, traveling the world, living around the USA, still a Hoosier, but with a little bit of Oregon in me, a touch of Wyoming and Massachusetts, even some Paris and Rome. Now I'm back again in Indiana, and after all these years, I have no doubt about who I really am. A citizen of the world, sharing the same home planet with everyone else. But wherever I am, there will always be a lot of that old-time Hoosier in me, smelling the hay, picking the wildflowers, living with common sense, then losing my sanity in a basketball game sometime in March in Indiana, or any other place on earth where the ball bounces and I happen to be. And I started out my farm history, and I would like to, with a couple of paragraphs here, I would like to read.
Sure.
Every farm is a world of its own with a unique story. This one began in northeast Indiana, in the northeast Indiana forest, and continues on to this day in ownership by the same family. That's what makes it special. A single family working on the same land, one generation after another, each passing on, giving way to new eras and the next in line. My brother Roy Wayne Pontzius is the fifth in the line of Waugh Pontzius families to live and work on the farm. When he was born in 1945, he was given the same middle name as his grandfather, Ira Wayne Pontzius, who raised his family in the same house. Farmers made up nearly 35% of the total population when Ira was farming. And by the time his grandson reached 60 years of age, fewer than 2% of American families worked on the farm. I can stand on the grave of my father in Blue River Cemetery, where 6 of his ancestors are buried, and gaze out over the tranquil fields where he cultivated the good life for more than 50 years. On my right, across the road, is the gray stone Blue River Community Church, where I was baptized in 1939. When it was built in 1911, Ira was on the church board of directors. It looked solid enough to last another 100 years. In 1847, my great-great-grandfather Joseph Waugh gave the Methodist that acre of land to build on. His father Joseph had done the same thing on his farm in Ross County, Ohio.
So your ancestors actually cleared land there.
Yes.
And I mean, there was they didn't buy it from somebody with a house and everything on.
Yes.
From the ground up, that was what they did.
Yes, and it was an amazing hardship to start from scratch. And at that time, Joseph Waugh had perhaps 2 11 or 12-year-old sons, and so he had to they had to make things everything for themselves back then. But also, I think he probably no one since then could have that satisfaction of making a farm from scratch and being a true pioneer. So,
So you mentioned there are 2 houses on the property. Are
Right.
they built of native timber?
there's probably some native timber. There is some in the house where I live now, and I have no idea. I'm not sure when it was built. Probably just after the Civil War. But the larger house was and the barn were built about 1911, 1915, and
So you live in the older of the 2 houses.
I think so.
A little bit
yes.
more history there.
Yes. I might also, there were a lot of hardship, a lot of tough times on our farm. There was the Depression, and in 1999 we had a major storm that blew down a couple large historic barns.
Oh.
And in 1986, there was another depression, and my brother had to sell his almost all of his implements, and has since recovered quite well. That's kind of the way farming is. So there were a lot of ups and downs, and I would like to read another excerpt from the book about after all the hard work, one of the good times. This was back in 1949, and after all the labors and struggles of Joseph and David Waugh and Levi and Ira and Robert Pontzius and their families for 100 years, the farm was reaching full bloom. Everything seemed to be clicking. The farm not only looked great, but it was efficient, well-run, and profitable, with less drudgery than ever before. The small, ideal, diversified Midwest family farm. And the family was ideal too in a lot of ways. And it not only looked ideal, the ideal of wholesomeness, but it seemed that everyone was pitching in without any one individual being overworked or unhappy. I don't remember feeling abused by too much work, except perhaps when having to patrol the oat fields with my sister to pull those damn bright yellow wild mustard weeds on a hot summer. And even then I would often sing while working, as I did when alone shoveling grain or going after the cows. It was a happy family, or perhaps more accurately, a family who lived with no serious problems to aggravate them, no dark clouds on the horizon to fear, and no past tragedies to haunt them. It was exactly the kind of farm that Purdue University and the Extension Service wanted to showcase the State Farm Management Tour in July 1949. 3 farms in Indiana were chosen each year to show other farmers and the public management practices of some of the most successful farms. And our farm was chosen because it was a small family farm, as opposed to a large successful farm. And this, of course, meant a lot of publicity around here. A photo of the family is standing together in front of the garage, appeared on the cover of Indiana Farmer's Guide magazine. And the Rhoda section of the Fort Wayne News Sentinel featured photos of the new chicken house and the barn, and a crowd of 1,200 people listening to my father being interviewed on the microphone by a Purdue professor on a wagon, and the whole family there standing and proudly with him.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
And we got a letter from Earl Butts, who was chairman of the Department of Agricultural Economics at Purdue, and later the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. And I'll just quickly read his letter. He said, "You have a splendid farm and a nice story to tell. I am certain as a result of our stop at your place, many farms in Indiana will be better run during the years ahead. It is always refreshing to see people such as you who have made such a genuine success of their business and who are at the same time making such a substantial contribution to a good community life in the areas where they live. It was, the proudest moment of the farm before or since, and the storyline in the history of the farm up to and including this point has an almost movie screenplay quality about it. In a sense, it was the golden age for family farms in Midwest America. A quiet, peaceful, and prosperous time to grow up and live and be respected in a small community without the pervasive influence of TV and out of sight of the poverty, racial strife, crime, pollution, corruption, and all that. And I grew up naive and innocent, and my parents were not the type of people who felt kids needed to be exposed to anything else. And they were, in fact, rather naive and innocent themselves.
That's not all bad.
That's the kind of era and place and time that I grew up.
Yeah, and Whitley County, it was an ideal place for that.
I think so, in a lot of ways.
So your farm, was it a commercial farm? I mean, did you raise cattle to sell or grain to sell, or was it just mostly a self-sufficient?
It was both. We butchered pigs and cattle, and we it was a dairy farm. And, we used the milk, and we had a big garden.
So it was a dairy farm. How did you sell that milk?
Well, I think about every day or every other day, a milkman would come, and the milk was put in these cans about that high, and they were in a kind of a water-filled
It was a water
trough.
bath cooler.
Yeah, and he was a muscular guy and very friendly, and so that's how we sold our milk. And
Okay.
Dairy was my favorite project in 4-H, and the first couple of years were a disaster. The first time, the papers, the vaccination papers or something for the calf, we didn't have them, or something happened there I couldn't show.
Oh.
And then the next year, I got a white ribbon, which is the lowest you could get. But I had a different heifer. It's a Holstein the next year. I guess it was about a year and a half old. And I went to a 4-H meeting, and a professor from Purdue was showing what an ideal cow or calf should be. And I was thinking, well, I wonder if my calf would have those qualities. And so I remember going home and looking at my calf and very closely, and I was kind of realized that it had all those good qualities that a cow is supposed to have. And I remember even getting up on the silo and looking down at all, from that angle. And so at fair time, I was kind of anticipating and kind of excited about what could happen. And the day before the fair, I was leading the calf around, and this person from was intently watching her. And then he said he would like to, he talked to me and wanted to have her in the state sale where all the best Holsteins. And this is kind of unusual because my father didn't care about how the cows looked or whether it was purebred or not.
Just as long as they produced.
Yeah, as long as they made enough milk to keep them around. And so we had to go buy a few purebred cows so I could have calves to show at the fair. And So I remember, I didn't tell anybody how excited I was, but I remember just before I showed her, I said, "Come on, Sarah, you can do it." And there were a lot of show cattle in there too, so I knew I didn't have much of a chance. But she actually won the grand champion at the Holstein Fair, and it was a huge thrill. And so one of those things that I really had no control over, but which ended up being, a really wonderful, fun thing to experience. So,
what would be the differences between 4-H then and 4-H now? The fair has got to be a whole lot different now than it was then.
4-H was a major thing with our family. My mom and dad met while they were in 4-H, and my dad always told me, he said, if I were in a house reading a book, he said, "Now I think, John, you should either come out and help on a farm or else work on your 4-H projects." So a lot of times I worked on the 4-H projects, and I remember having as many as 9 projects, including entomology and forestry, and I even took baking one year. And my dad was Robert Pontzius was fair board chairman for about 7 years in the 1950s, and I was the county junior leader president, and so it was a really big thing. 4-H was in our family.
So the 4-H grounds themselves, how have they
Okay,
changed?
you ask about the changes. I'm sure my father would be really happy with how the 4-H fair has continued without being overly commercialized and charging to get in, and it is still a wonderful fair.
I heard at one point that the land was donated with the express fact that there would not be carnival rides on it.
No, I don't know about that, but that's
Because
quite
I know
possible.
there never are.
I might add that there is the fair still has an open show if you have art or vegetables, crafts, and I just for old times I every year bring in some vegetables and herbs so I could experience how it was, and I never, for several years, I didn't win anything, but I thought, well, it would be nice sometime. And so this past year, well, my sweet onions were the champion veggies at the
Very
4-H fair.
cool. Very cool. So back to growing up in Thorncreek, and this farm that, I assume you always had vegetables, but there still had to be some essentials that you had to have that you couldn't actually produce on the farm, soap and things like that. Where did you go to purchase those kind of things?
You mentioned soap. My mother made soap all of her life, practically.
Really?
I can't tell you, I think it was lard and lye and that sort of thing, yeah.
How cool.
Let me tell you a little bit about my mother's family. She grew up along Lincoln Way.
Before there was a Highway 30.
Yes.
Okay.
And her grandfather was the first white child born in Columbia Township. And his father, that was Samuel Shoemaker. His father was Asa Shoemaker, and his mother was Elizabeth. And they were the first settlers in Columbia Township. They're about on a farm a couple miles just west of Columbia City, and there's a brick on US 30, and there's a big brick house there. And And so there's a lot of history there. Now, Ace's father was Joseph Shoemaker, who came later. Asa Shoemaker came in about 1837 in Columbia Township. And Columbia Township wasn't as settled as some of the other townships like Cleveland or Churubusco. And
Because it was farther away from Fort Wayne settlement, I assume.
possibly, and so Joseph Shoemaker died in 1864 at age 105, and he's buried here in Green Hill Cemetery. And he was in both the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. So he was a remarkable character, and he was very alert and until his last year or so. And my Asa Shoemaker's wife's family came, her ancestors, she had 6 ancestors that came across on the Mayflower. So this is an example of a family with a lot of roots in America and in Whitley County.
Cool. So, let's see, you went to school at Thorncreek. That school is no longer a school.
No, it's still standing, but it's I don't recall when it switched to I guess it would be Northern Heights, but it still is there.
And what was the high school like when you weren't at a county high school? You were actually in Columbia City
Yes.
at the high school.
It was different coming into Columbia City into a large school after being in a smaller school in the township.
Was there still that township rivalry once you got to
Well,
town?
I think sometimes the city kids look down on the country kids, and maybe I've heard them say they didn't invite us to their parties. But it was not a major thing. It was we had some good teachers, and Max Gandy, our principal, was an unforgettable character, very stern, but seemed to be fair and had a good reputation. And by the way, he was, and in both Max Gandy and his wife are related to me.
Wow.
Which I didn't know at the time.
Probably could have used that, huh?
and I was active in speech and on the newspaper, the Eagle, and when I was a senior, I was the senior class president, and so I enjoyed the whole experience, the whole high school experience.
Well, you said you were in speech, who was the speech coach at that time? Do you remember?
I think it was Mr. Fruits. There were a couple new people at that time.
And
I do remember my debate partner when I was about a junior was Jim Grant. And he signed my annual James the Brains grant, and which was justified because he was a brilliant debater, very talented. And I was not very good at all, so I didn't continue debate.
Now, I know you have a few special teachers that you thought were just...
Well, I guess to me the most special one was Leon Alder. He, by the way, at one time lived in the house I lived, rented a house for a couple years, his family. And he was like a second father to me. He was a true gentleman and very intelligent and a good role model. And he's still living in North Manchester in a retirement community, and I still talk to him now and then, and he still remembers a lot
Isn't
of
that
the old
something?
times. So I was very lucky to have him, and as a 4-H leader and as an ag.
Oh, he was actually 4-H as well.
He was our 4-H leader all that time, and so at that time there were 4-H. There were schools in Jefferson Township and Quessy and Cherrybusco, and they all had very excellent role models they were all great people, and for the farm kids to get to know and be taught by.
So I'm assuming the high school was smaller than it is now. It's been added on to.
Oh yes, our class, the class after ours, was the last class to be in the old high school, and that was about 1957, 58. And so then the next year, when they went to the new school, that's when Quessy and Jefferson Center started coming to Columbia City High School.
Okay. Kids today get to drive to school. Did you have that luxury?
I actually drove to school when I was a senior, and I remember one time I hit a slick spot and had a wreck on the way, because I was involved in a lot of extracurricular activities.
So there was no bus to take you home afterwards.
So it was easy
Sure.
to talk my father into letting me drive the car.
Otherwise, Dad had to come get you.
Yes. Well, I could have taken a bus any time too.
So what did you do after school? I mean, were there hangouts in town that you got to?
Well, on the farm, it was a very different life for, say, a teenager. When you went home, and then you worked on a farm instead of hanging out and with other kids. And you worked with your friends were animals a lot of times, and I loved animals, and so it was very different. Place to grow up. Then I went on to, I surprised my family by going to Wabash College, and so very different route than what they expected me to.
They kind of expected you to hang out and.
Well, everyone assumed that in our family that I would go to Purdue University and be an ag teacher or something like that. So, and I've always been somewhat of an independent person and a maverick, and kind of like to become kind of a philosopher artist type, and which was kind of foreign to the family, and but I think it's worked out pretty well.
Very good. So what else would you like to speak about today?
Well, you have any other questions?
Well, I just kind of wondered what kind. You said you went to college and then you did some traveling.
Okay.
When you came back, was it a big difference by the time you came back? In the county and in the community? Or are we pretty static?
Well, it's been, of course, when I was gone for many years, I learned a lot, and I had a different perspective, and I was very curious to see what the people were like from that perspective here, and I noticed right away that people in Whitley County, the Columbia City area, are more friendly. I remember coming back to the grocery store, and I only had one thing at the checkout counter, and a lady ahead of me had a whole bunch of things, and she said, why don't you go ahead of me, because you only have one thing. And that was just a typical example of what didn't happen in a larger city. And when I came back, I would walk into my house at night, and I would worry, well, there's someone in the bushes waiting for me to attack me, because, in cities, that's what you worry about. But after a while, in Whitley County, that's not a problem. So that's very nice. I do feel that Whitley County is, it's more rural and more conservative than a lot of places I had been, and maybe less progressive. And one example is when the new library, this wonderful new library, moved here, and what to do with the old library. The old library was well loved and beautiful and historic, and was started by Simon Peabody, and I think many communities in Northeast Indiana and around the country one thing they would have made sure of is to save this beautiful historic landmark and use it for something. And in this county, there's not, we don't think about preserving historic buildings as much. They have character, and they're what makes a town special, especially if you've been away and come back. It's something you really can love about your community. And but I gave it my best shot to save it, and and it didn't happen. But I still belong to an organization called People Preserving History, and we have had some success. For example, saving the Hooper House, just north of the post office, and it was about to be demolished. And so I hope that that by now we've raised the awareness about the importance of saving and preserving our historic landmarks.
Okay, well, what is the Hooper House? Can you tell us a little bit about that house?
Okay, A.Y. Hooper, Adams Y. Hooper, was probably the most admirable person that ever lived in Whitley County. From what I can read about him in county histories and the old newspapers. He was, first of all, so accomplished. He was a lawyer. He was a state senator. He owned a newspaper, one of the newspapers for a while. He started a school for women, and but he died, I think, just over 50, age 50, and the county history said that when he died, he was so loved, so respected, and so admired that it was considered a public calamity.
Wow.
And it was his character that was so remarkable. And he built a house in 1856, a brick house, and eventually the family sold it to this other religious organization. Right now I can't remember, and it was there for, they used it for from about 1916 to about 1964, and then it was vacant. And it was the Baptist used it for a while.
Oh yeah.
So
now that's on Chauncey Street. Is that actually on Silk Stocking Row, or does that begin the next block down?
I think that was considered a part of what they used to call Silk Stocking Road, because the upper class and the mansions in town were on that street, and the Adams family and other families, and you can still see these wonderful little mansions on Chauncey Street, and the Hooper House has been restored beautifully and is
It is beautiful.
kind of the jewel of the neighborhood there. And we hope to someone can purchase the house and use it for many years.
It is lovely. So what else do you have for us today?
Well, there's a lot of things that I could talk about outside of Whitley County, but as far as county agricultural history, I might say something about the Ag Museum, which is on the fairgrounds. Agriculture was a major part of our county, and still is. And this has preserved the history of it. And it is the only agricultural museum in Northeast Indiana.
Really?
And a guy by the name of Ron Meyer was very important, and he was in starting this, and he has been president of the Fair Board for a number of years.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there an admission fee? Is it open all the time?
There's no admission fee. It's like at the county fair. There's no admission there. No, it's open during the fair, and at other special times they have big antique tractor sales, and they have it open then, and it's open for meetings for people. So maybe in the future it can be open more frequently if they have enough money to
That'd
keep
be
it
good.
open.
That would be good.
Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about my ancestors in the various wars. I've had about 17 ancestors in the Revolutionary War. That's because my ancestors were over here pretty early. And in one case, the son and the father and the grandfather were all three in the Revolutionary War. And I'm sure the grandfather by that time was not shooting too many people, but in some way he participated. I had a couple, my great-grandfather, two great-grandfathers in the Civil War. And
they both fought on the same side?
Yes. And especially my great-grandfather Solomon Pontzius, it affected his life later on. He was in all 4 years in the Civil War, and he was taken prisoner at one time, and he wrote a short diary of his experience, and he got some kind of dysentery while he was in the siege of Vicksburg, and he never really got over that, and he tried to get a disability, but of all my ancestor farmers, he had the toughest time. He never was able to accumulate a sizable farm, and but he was such a hard worker and such a good man. And he ended up at age 55 dying in a well.
Oh my!
In Thorncreek Township, and he was someone that dug wells and repaired them, and he was repairing a well, and they have what they call the gas, the dams, and he asked if they would put a chicken down to see if the chickens would survive down there, and the farmer didn't want to waste a chicken, and so he went down, and they heard him gasping for air, and then he fell, and so he did die in a well. My other great-grandfather, David Waugh, was joined in about 1864, and so he wasn't in as long. And while he was there, his father bought him a small farm, which is part of our farm now, and it was it was another case where I think the Civil War experience affected his later abilities and success, but I can relate to him because he liked to read, and he was a very interesting person, and he was the same size as I am, and had a beard just like mine, and so it's fun to relate to a great-grandfather like that.
Sure.
So the wars, the Civil War affected, even though it wasn't fought up here, it affected the people who fought in it. And in fact, my Solomon Pontzius then left his son, my grandfather, as an orphan, and so he was. I can't remember the term, but near our farm, he was put out as indentured, not a servant, but indentured, and
Right.
where he signed a contract where from about age 11 to age 18, he was with the Rhodes family, and they were liable to, feed and clothing, and send him to school, and then he, on his side, he needed to work on a farm and learn how to farm, and so I believe it was another Swiss family, and the Pontziuses had a lot of Swiss in their family, and so in that case it worked out very well.
Yeah, I understand. We have a book in the Indiana room here. I understand there were several indentures, quite a few actually, indentures in Whitley County.
Okay. Yes.
So, yeah, and most of them that I could see were right around the Civil War time. So yes, the Civil War did have quite an impact on Whitley County.
Yes, and he grew up to be very active in the community. Ira Pontzius and my other grandfather, Frank Goodrich, were both on the first board of directors of the REMC, which is the Rural Electric Membership Corporation,
Wow.
and which we got electricity in about 1937, and so that was about the time they were. So I guess if there's a theme that runs through our family, it is dedication to community service. And my father, that was his real passion, more than farming. And so it's kind of in the genes. He was a Farm Bureau Co-op board chairman for 20 years or so. And
Wow.
so it's just something that's been very important.
Alrighty, well, it looks like our time's about up. I want to thank you for coming and sharing your experience and your life with us. And if you think of anything else, let us know later.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.